Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Reach Football Show. This morning, I am joined by Andy Dunn, Chief Sports Writer of the Daily Mirror, John Cross, no relation, Chief Football Writer of the Daily Mirror, and Matt Dunn, number one football writer at the Daily Express. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Morning.
It feels like it's been a tumultuous week already, and we're only on Thursday. Let's start with the issue of the blow that all of football took early in the week when the Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced that there would be no pilot scheme allowing fans back into games. This affects sport in general and football in particular for obvious reasons. John, can I start with you? What are the implications further down the line? It feels like this is a real hammer blow to football, but generally lower league clubs in the terms of their lack of revenue, match day revenue streams. Do you see a bleak future ahead?
I do. I mean, I think it's been a devastating few days, really, for particularly for League One and League Two. I mean, Championship clearly, as concerns as well, and they are far removed from the kind of the fat cat multimillionaires, billionaires, really, of the Premier League themselves. But for League One and League Two, they are so reliant. They're so dependent on gate receipts. They were moving, I think, in the right direction with pilot schemes just last weekend. I think that there was a genuine, bearing in mind when you consider that those pilot schemes were just a matter of days ago, to then kind of get this announcement on Tuesday morning that basically fans back in football has been paused has been a real wake-up call. And as I see it, and indeed as I understand it, they basically, the view is from many that unless they get a Premier League bailout, because the government have now made it clear that we won't be stepping into the breach, it's down to the football family to sort itself out, then there's a very real possibility that League One and League Two will effectively have to hibernate for the season, put their season on hold, and then see kind of what next year brings. Because my feeling is that you won't see, I don't think, as things stand, and there must be a push, and I think there should be a push, I don't think you'll see fans back in stadiums in the 2021 season unless things change. I think the government of having pushed football in the direction of getting fans back in, they've now maybe panicked and thought, blimey, have we pushed this too soon? Has football gone too soon? Well, I don't think it has. It seems crazy to me that basically you can wander around an indoor shopping centre, but you can't go to an outdoor football stadium under very, very strict protocols, the sort of protocols that would be in place, I think, in to a greater extent at a football ground than that shopping centre. So I think it's been a very grim week for football. I completely understand the balance between the need for safety and indeed the kind of the desire to go back and to watch your football team. But I think it's been a devastating week, and unless things change and the Premier League steps into the breach, I can't see how League One and League Two will complete the season.
Andy, you wrote a column last week about the divide is getting larger between the haves and the have-nots. And you made the great comparison of the fact that Macclesfield last week went basically under due to a £500,000 bill, which is not even 1 week's wages for Gareth Bale, who was joining Tottenham at the very same time as Macclesfield were going to the wall. Do you think now that the Premier League will come under almost impossible pressure to come out and say or do something to help League One and League Two in terms of funding?
Yeah, listen, it's quite a sort of an easy target to sort of the Premier League to take aim at, in the sense that we all thought that in the current climate that spending would be reined in. Instead, we're seeing Diego Jota go for £40 million. We're seeing reserve centre-halves being transferred for £12 million. We're still seeing the big numbers. We are still seeing, huge wages, huge signing-on fees, huge transfer fees, and huge agents' fees. Let's not get away from that also. They are still going on. And we thought that might have been reined in. It hasn't. Now, they would argue the Premier League that, they still need to keep going. You need to, and that is that as their lifeblood, big signings, big players. You have to have a club and a team that is successful to keep going. Otherwise, the staff, for example, that they get criticised for sacking, would be sacked anyway because the club's going nowhere. I understand all that, but it's just not a good look to see all this money still swirling around at the top end of the game and clubs basically being held to the wall. Now, it's more complex than that. In the Premier League might say, well, listen, if we give them all this money, what's to say that they're not going to waste it? Like they probably have wasted money in the past. Macclesfield Town, for example. Now, listen, COVID was just basically the coup de grace. It was the final push. Macclesfield Town were going to the wall anyway through bad ownership, bad run of the club. Now, so are the Premier League basically going to say, well, we'll just be throwing good money after bad? So to a certain extent, I understand that argument why there might be reluctance. However, they're going to have to do it. And then what's got to happen, and what the Football League then must take responsibility, is to regulate itself so that the money is spent properly. The money goes to saving the clubs. The money doesn't go on paying, some striker $4,000 a week, and he hardly plays or something like that. It's got to go. There's got to be strict regulation, whether that be in the form of an independent regulator, government regulation, a salary cap. Something has to happen so that if that money is given, then it's used to save clubs and used wisely. That, I think, is the complex bit of the arguments. But the general bit, do the Premier League have a responsibility? Absolutely they do to look after those clubs. Listen, without League One and League Two, the Premier League will soon be in difficulty. Look at players in the Premier League who go out and play at League One, League Two. Look at those players who've been on loan everywhere. Look at Dean Henderson, for example, who's now an England goalkeeper, who's been in loan at lower league clubs and then Sheffield United. They have that responsibility. I understand the reservations they might have, but I just think it's just not a good look. If you want to sustain the great structure, the 92 club professional league structure, then the Premier League have to step in right now.
Matt, there's talk this week of football, along with other sporting bodies, going to the government, having meetings, asking for the potential of a massive bailout of hundreds of millions of pounds to see these clubs through these dark months ahead. Do you think the government, while they have these talks in the back of their mind, do you think there's an issue where they look at someone, say, for example, like Frank Lampard at Chelsea, who has spent 200 plus million on new players in the last few weeks, and think, well, hang on a minute, you guys, along with the rest of those underneath you, are asking for money to help out, but you continue to spend, without a care in the world, and is that not a bad look?
That's a massive issue for the government. Everybody wants some money. Everyone needs money. And for football to come, any part of football to come to them and say, look, we need money at the time that Chelsea is spending £200 million, which is, for example, exactly the same amount of money that Rick Parry's saying is going to cost the entire 72 club unit of the EFL over the next months or this season if fans don't come in. When that sort of thing's going on, the government is an easy one for the government. They've got to get re-elected ultimately. That's what governments fundamentally, that's their main primary focus. And they act in a way that it keeps people happy, most people happiest. There are a number of people who don't like the fact that football gets subsidies, who don't like the game particularly. And it's an easy tap-in for the government to say, no, football, go and sort yourself out. And actually, when football looks at itself, it can sort itself out if there's the will to. And it comes back to what the others have been saying. It's a competitive sport, and it's against the whole nature of football to help your rivals out when it's all about beating them over 90 minutes on the pitch. Why should you help them out off it? And that's the problem football's got to be made to overcome. Because it is disgraceful when top Premier League clubs are spending this money at a time when, like you say, a week's wages would save a football club.
John, Sean Dyche was asked about this issue of the Premier League helping out lower league clubs in his press conference this week. And he made the point, well, that's all well and good, but what about other businesses in other industries? Are they doing things to help businesses that are less fortunate than themselves in terms of banking and things like that. I get his point, but I Googled how many players started for Burnley at Leicester last week, and 8 of the starting 11 were all signed from lower league clubs. Doesn't that tell you how important these clubs remain to the top flight clubs in terms of providing players?
Absolutely, it does, and it's a great point, And Burnley, you're right to say, its foundations are born out of the EFL. Frankly, large swathes of the England squad is born out, of the Football League in the traditional sense. And listen, I was on Frank Lampard's Carabao Cup type press conference, and actually I asked him that question about, shouldn't the Premier League do it? I apologise for getting political, and basically sort of said, shouldn't kind of the Premier League do its bit? In amongst this, Chelsea have spent £200 million, therefore, don't you feel kind of duty bound? And he was the first to say, look, I'm managing the Championship. I'm aware of the difficulties facing Derby, for example. I started, my playing career out on loan at Swansea. And he's sympathetic and respectful to it, while equally making the point, well, actually, Chelsea have done their bit in terms of, sort of not furloughing staff, where other clubs have sort of said, that they would furlough staff and then done a U-turn. They've always been consistent in not making the hotel available. So look, there'll always be an angle from both sides. And ultimately, I think that the Premier League will step up and they'll find a solution. I don't think it's kind of it'll be a gift token. It'll be a loan, and it'll be a loan with an interest rate, and it'll be a loan founded on the fact that basically, you've got to, the EFL kind of got to forego the parachute payment of Fulham, for example. You've got to kind of abide by our rules on testing, for example, and things like that. And so I think there's a lot of kind of, obstacles to overcome. I do think they'll overcome it, but they have to overcome it very quickly. But I think this kind of, arrogance of the Premier League that we live in this bubble is absurd. And listen, I think some clubs are very sympathetic to it. About 3 meetings ago, I was given to believe that kind of there was a discussion on it, and that the 3 promoted clubs clearly immediately said, yes, we're up for that. Other clubs joined in. But I do think there's some big clubs that are naysayers on it, that take the view, hang on a minute, we've got major problems of our own. We're hemorrhaging, £3-4 million every single home game because of a lack of gate receipts. We've got these issues to overcome. So that's why we're talking about a loan rather than kind of, anything else. Don't forget, obviously, the Premier League have already forwarded, £125 million in cash advance to try and help the EFL. And that's another bone of contention, really. But I just think it comes back to the fact that, the government do look at Chelsea and what they've spent. They do look at other clubs. I mean, Liverpool have spent, much of the summer, haven't they, basically saying, behind the scenes, we won't spend, we'll have to sell before we can buy. Well, they may end up sort of kind of selling them to offset, but they have made significant purchases this summer, and they're not by any means the biggest spenders. So I think clubs, look at Arsenal, blimey, 55 redundancies, cutbacks, asking for pay cuts, and then all of a sudden the players must look at it and think, blimey, where are you finding that money from? So, we've got to be realistic about that. And amongst that kind of atmosphere and climate, I think the EFL are quite right to say, come on, help us, because we've helped you for so many years.
John, can I just butt in a second? Because you talked a lot about the clubs there. The people who are actually taking quite a lot of money out of the game are the players. And I don't want to have the cheap shot like we had at the start of lockdown where, they need to dig into their pockets. But quite genuinely, they've signed huge contracts on the back of the experience they've gained in Leagues 1 and 2, often on loan. And just as a collective, what are the PFA saying on all this? That's a massive organisation that represent at the top of the game 500 well-paid Premier League football players. And I'm wondering what the PFA are doing on this and whether they're thinking, what can we do to help? because they're part of the football family too. And it's just an aside that we're expecting 20 Premier League chairmen to vote for Christmas. Yeah, Turkey's voting for Christmas. Well, the players are actually benefiting from the game as a collective, not an individual, not so should dig into his own pockets, but as a collective. What are the PFA doing? Because from what I hear, down at the bottom ends of the leagues, when chairmen are trying to renegotiate salaries in Leagues 1 and 2, nobody is telling the players, look, you've got a time to get real. It's not the same payday as it was. They're demanding the same sorts of money as they were before COVID. And the whole thing's dysfunctional, and nobody's telling the players what they should do.
Andy, just one final thing on this topic. Richard Masters, the chief executive of the Premier League, do you think this is bubbling up into something which could provide his sternest test of his leadership so far in terms of how does he actually persuade the big Premier League clubs to give money to a pot that will help the lower league clubs survive?
Yeah, it is. It's his biggest test by a mile. One, obviously, that you've never seen coming. If you go back to the previous incumbents, apart from the ones who sort of were taking the job then turned it down. If you go back to Richard Scudamore, this is the type of, whatever you thought of him, this was the type of time that he would show that sort of leadership and convince, what is essentially, don't forget, the Premier League is essentially a private members club. So there's 20 members and they have their own way of voting, 14 votes, whatever is needed. And basically, Richard Masters has his title as chief executive, but he has no real executive power. The power is clearly with the voting 20 members. But it's him who needs to sit down with them, whether it be remotely, and actually convince them that this is the best way forward for the Premier League. Whether or not he can do that, I don't know. I don't know him well enough, to be honest with you, to know whether he's got that power of persuasion or that power to convince them otherwise. But yes, you're right. It's a huge test for him because he also has to balance the fact that he's representing that league. And, as the lads have already said, there are serious concerns amongst clubs who are hemorrhaging money every week themselves. And in the end, if you're a business that is basically losing money every week, then to be asked to give it to another business who happens to be losing money as well, it just, I understand from an outsider's point of view the problems he's got there. Now, it's a huge test for Richard Masters. That'll be intriguing to see how it pans out over the next week or so.
Good stuff, boys. John, the other burning issue of the week, which has hit all the back pages for the last few days, is the issue of testing with lower league clubs. We've had a remarkable scenario where Leyton Orient allowed Tottenham to pay for testing ahead of their game in the Carabao Cup, and lo and behold, a raft of players tested positive, so the game was called off. In contrast to that, Hull played West Ham, refused West Ham's offer of testing, and the game went ahead, despite the fact that Moyes and 2 West Ham players actually had the virus. This throws up a whole raft of implications in terms of some clubs are willing to be tested, some don't want to. Now, Leyton Orient have clearly missed out on a payday with the cup game. They're now going to probably lose some league games as a result. They've got a whole squad in quarantine. What's your take on the responsibility of League 1 and League 2 clubs to actually be tested before games?
Well, listen, I think it's pretty clear that the EFL, as of this season, took the decision based on scientific evidence and kind of the results from last season, not to force clubs to do it themselves. And so basically, the only tests that are mandatory now in the EFL were on return to pre-season, halfway through pre-season, and before the first game. If any players left for international duty in the last international break, then they had to do another round of testing then to make sure. So, it's not as if they've not done any testing whatsoever. But basically, clearly you'd have to be naive to think that it wasn't done, without a kind of recognition that basically it is an expensive process. I mean, it's £150 a player. If you're talking about 25 players per round, then you're getting up to £150,000 a season. Which is a huge consideration. for, Championship, let alone League One, League Two. Look, my understanding is that a lot of Championship clubs do it. They've taken it upon themselves to do it. Some clubs have turned it down. Obviously, it's not just kind of, Hull, for example. Brentford took the decision not to. But actually, Brentford, bearing in mind they had a sort of kind of elongated season last season, they've ended up doing 4 rounds of tests since the back end of, since the start of August. So actually, if you think about it, it's getting on for a test a week, basically. So, I think that they've taken the view, well, actually, that, the EFL tells us that we don't have to test. So why do we then suddenly break protocol at the behest of, the Premier League, when, let's be honest here, people forget that the Carabao Cup is an EFL competition. So they're basically still, sort of bound by those. I think Orient is a really interesting point because whichever way you look at it, Spurs have paid for 25 tests. I've been told that sort of around 75% came back positive. That's unprecedented. That is absolutely unprecedented. Even in the kind of original kind of, spike in which brought about lockdown and Project Restart, that didn't happen. Clearly, Leyton Orient have done something badly wrong there. They've broken the protocol. I don't think it.
Moment.
I do. Well, I think it's brought it to the discussion, brought it to the debating table. Really, I do think that basically the EFL have now decided to review the process of not doing tests, and they're basically looking at that again. But it's very, very difficult to tell League One and League Two clubs who've just had this week been told that they can't, have fans back, to suddenly find huge amounts of money because the EFL, basically can't afford to pay for it like the Premier League does. So it falls upon the clubs to do it. I mean, I think it's a huge debating point, but I just generally feel that football will carry on regardless because the EFL clubs won't do it. They don't want to do it. And then basically, where do you go from here? But the Orient situation has highlighted it, really. And it has been an embarrassing week from that perspective, I think.
Matt, if EFL clubs say, right, we're playing a Premier League team and they refuse to be tested and say, basically, we can't afford it, we're going to take a risk, would Premier League clubs be justified in saying, well, we're not going to fulfil the fixture?
I think, out of the whole thing, I think Hull's stance is absolutely despicable on what's wrong with football as a whole in this whole issue. It's all about trying to get an advantage on the pitch, but it's not. It's about dealing with very difficult times in a sane, responsible way. The whole point about setting up football in a COVID bubble, it's supposed to be sanitised, it's supposed to be a special case because it's tested, it's looked after, it's nurtured, that bubble, and you can allow things to go on inside that bubble that you wouldn't be allowed to do in the street. And part of that has to be that your bubble has to be open to scrutiny whenever anyone chooses to. And for someone to offer to pay Hull's tests, there's no reason financially not to. The EFL, I'm sure, would love to say we'll carry on our testing, but they know the pressure that it's putting on their clubs, and it is unfortunately a balancing act, and it's one that risks losing their status with the government as a protected sporting bubble. And for Hull to do that, it's just horribly irresponsible, despicable, and whoever made that decision to turn down that opportunity to test the players, to show that the system was working, and if, in the case of Orient, it wasn't working, to then be able to deal responsibly with the health of their own staff in a responsible manner, knowing what the situation was, then that person should seriously be wondering what he's doing and the job that he's doing, because that's a completely untenable position. And if Premier League clubs quite rightly offer to pay the money to protect their bubble, then EFL clubs shouldn't have an option. They should allow themselves to be tested.
Can you get off the fence, Matt, and confirm that you're annoyed with me?
It's difficult because my wife's a vet and has dealt with foot and mouth diseases and pandemics in the animal world. And until we all individually take responsibilities for what's going on in the world, the very real things that are going on in the world, regardless of football, regardless of kicking a bag of air around, we need then, there's no hope for us as a society. So we need to get on top of this, and then the sooner we come out of it the other end.
Andy, this essentially is an issue which boils down to the health and well-being of players, knowing that they're, not carrying the virus before they're heading to a game. What's the PFA's role in this? Do you think they've gone quiet, the PFA? We've not heard from them recently. They are the governing body of the footballers. They're there to represent the footballers and look after their best interests. Should they not be putting their hand in their pocket and saying, look, we'll put some money towards the testing of League One and League Two players before these games?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. Matt brought the PFA's role up before. This is an organisation that has huge cash reserves. We all know that. We all know that it's a wealthy trade union, and I don't see why they shouldn't be also, considering, of course, most of their money anyway comes from the Premier League, the Premier League's TV deal. So you're only taking out of that. I totally agree. I don't see why the PFA shouldn't step in and help fund testing throughout the whole pyramid. It just seems a no-brainer to me. I totally agree. I mean, nothing much more to say on it. It's that they have been quiet. There have been previously, never mind this situation, there have been sorts of questions asked about how they've dealt with the health and welfare of the players down the years, particularly with all the research and the growing evidence about the dementia-related cases to football. And I do think it would be, if nothing else, it would be good for them to come out and actually say, well, this is what we're doing. This is how we want to make sure that all our members throughout the whole game, and let's face it, the members in the lower leagues rely more on the PFA than, your superstars of the Premier League, and to make sure that their health and well-being comes first. I totally agree. I would like to hear more from PFA.
Okay, good stuff, boys. Right, let's move on to non-COVID related issues. John, Dele Alli, his situation at Tottenham with Jose appears to be very fractious. He's been accused of being lazy, been left out of his team. Where do you see that situation? How do you see that situation playing out in the coming weeks and months?
I think it will play out in typical Jose fashion, in that basically he's used it with previous players. He's used it at previous clubs. Basically, tough love, and I think it down the years. I think it's borne fruit for him. I don't think he's always worked necessarily well, but basically he's tried to get tough with players. Whether it's kind of Joe Cole back in those first days at Chelsea. He had sort of kind of such a running war with Iker Casillas, for example. Whether it's Paul Pogba or Luke Shaw at United, it's just. It's a tried and trusted method, basically. Leave them out, basically teach them a lesson, and that's how. I do think we need to keep it in a little bit of perspective. In that, if we were talking, Jose had completely ostracised Dele Alli to teach him the lesson of his life. Basically, you're not doing enough for me. I need more from you. Well, he wouldn't have picked him first game of the season to start. Yes, he hooked him at half time, but I do actually kind of think, well, yes, there was a few players missing. I get that, but basically, he needed him first game of the season, so he played him. He hooked him at half time, and that was brutal. And then basically, doesn't play for the next two games, not in the squad. To travel to Southampton, and then basically, he's laid it on the line, isn't he? That Dele Alli would have played at Leyton Orient, and so kind of that in itself maybe might be seen as a bit of punishment before the game was then called off. So. I think Dele Alli is a wonderful player. He's arguably 2018 World Cup. He was England's biggest star. Fabulous player. The progression from a £5 million signing from MK Dons within a year is in the England squad. That's a sensational bit of business from Tottenham. Injuries have been brutal in the last couple of years. And I just think that Jose Mourinho, as we've seen from the Amazon documentary, basically, and even comments when he took over, about, am I getting Dele or Dele's brother,
yes.
Basically makes it very clear that he thinks there's two sides to this player, and he wants a player that works very hard, delivers goals and assists. There is this thing with Dele in that I think he's a wonderful talent and basically needs a manager to get him back. But Dele is he's very, very prolific when he's at his best with goals and assists. Also, if he's playing below his best, then there are games then that go by and he contributes little to it. He needs to have that end product. And we know what Jose is about. Jose's football is about end product. It's about kind of statistics. It's about, getting the job done. And I think that basically he cannot afford a Dele Alli in there to play, to feel his way back to form. And listen, I don't think Spurs want to sell him. Jose's made it pretty clear he won't let him go in this window. Does that solve the problem? No, I don't think it does. I think it just pushes it down the road. I'm not sure that it's a match made in heaven.
Mark, when a manager like Jose calls a player out like that in public and sort of, puts him on questions in effect, is that the ultimate test of a player's strength of character?
I think it's supposed to be. It struck me the other day, and I don't know why I didn't think about it before, but to my mind, Dele Alli is the Nick Kyrgios of football. He's hugely talented, has a bit of devilment about him, but ultimately you don't know whether he's quite got it within his mentality to go to the extra lengths that some of the real world-class players that are around him have to go to be as good as they are. And I think he's frightened of doing that because he might not be quite good enough. And it is so frustrating. He's likeable, he's pleasant. For all the negative publicity, there isn't too much about him. He's fairly straightforward. And he knows, and he makes the right noises when he's told off like Mourinho does. That scene in the Amazon Prime video that Jose Mourinho doesn't want to talk about, having had 9 episodes of smoke being blown up his backside. Now he doesn't want to talk about it anymore. But that episode where he sits down Dele Alli and talks to him like a father would, it is very touching. And you can see it goes in. But I don't think he's got what it takes to do it. And he needs to find that very quickly, or he is going to be lost to football. Because, you can't survive at the very top of the game. It gets you so far talent. But I was there when Kyrgios beat Nadal that first time 10 years ago. And I look back at the transcript when they played again. And Nadal said, for all that he got beaten, he said, we'll see when Kyrgios gets to the top 10 or not. And the highest Kyrgios has ever been in the world is 14. And that's kind of where Dele Alli is at the moment. He's a top 20 world-class player. He's not one of the top 10 or the top 5, the top 3 or the very best. And unless he finds that mentality, he's never going to be.
Andy, that leads me nicely on to my next question, which was, before we left Russia in 2018, after England had been knocked out of the semi-final, Gareth said, I remember him saying, it's part of a sort of debriefing of how the tournament had gone. He basically said, look, I hope these players don't think that this is the best it's ever going to get. I hope they don't think this is going to be the scale of the mountain here. I want to push on, build on this and, not rest on the laurels, so to speak. Would it be harsh to say that Dele has maybe done that in the last couple of years? He was a shining light in that World Cup run to the last 4. He had the world at his feet, and his career seems to have sort of gradually ground to a halt since then. Is that being harsh on him, do you think? Or?
Yeah, it's been incredibly harsh on him, mate. And I think Matt's been incredibly harsh on him. Don't forget, this is a lad, by the way, who has played an awful lot of football. He may still be young, but he's played an awful lot of football. This is a lad who, defied the odds, really, to make it as a top-class professional footballer. He had a tough upbringing. He had to fight for everything he got. He came to the lower leagues, at MK Dons. He was a young lad who had to stand up for himself. He's been a young lad who's had to stand up for himself for a long time. And I don't see any evidence that he's just sacked it off and sort of thought, right, well, I've made it. I don't see any evidence at all. I see a manager that he doesn't get on with now. I see a manager that maybe doesn't have the tools to get the best out of him. I don't buy into this idea that he is somehow plateaued. Listen, maybe there's a dip because he's had that. This isn't a kid who was brought up in some gilded academy. He's actually made it from a very, very tough start in life, as well as football. Now, the Mourinho situation is clearly, to me, it's not recoverable. I mean, clearly it's had this rift already between the two. It's not recoverable. Maybe Pochettino will get a job somewhere and take Dele, and all will be well again. I just think that it's very harsh to turn around and say, this is a guy who has suddenly settled for, whatever life he's got now. I don't see any evidence of that at all. I see a top-class player who doesn't fit in to the way Jose Mourinho thinks about football. Simple as that. There have been others before, as John has mentioned, and there'll be others to come. And the best route to go will be for Dele and Mourinho to part their ways. And that's why I think, for the good of his career, he has to do that.
So, Andy, there's less than 2 weeks left before the transfer window closes. If you were Dele, would you be pushing to leave before this deadline comes around in October?
Absolutely, I'd be pushing to leave before then. Listen, Gareth Bale's come in. He'll be fit at some stage, I assume. And, Dele clearly just does not fit into Jose Mourinho's mindset. It's as simple as that. And once, and again, John referenced it, even when he first came in, Jose, and it was a nice sound bite, and it gave us all an intro or two for 3 or 4 weeks about Dele's brother. But from then, the writing was on the wall, and this happens, it's not just Jose, it happens with other managers. Managers go in, and they basically just think, okay, well, he's symptomatic of what I don't like about this playing staff. And that's fine, and you move on. If I was Dele, I'd be pushing, before the transfer window's up to get out of there, yes.
Andy, sorry, can I step in again? Before you paint me as harsh on Dele Alli, I love Dele Alli. I think he's a great player. That season, 16-17, he scored 17 goals. What's lost from that, Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard took penalties. They never scored 17 goals in a season from open play, ever in their entire careers. That's how good he can be. Yeah. What I'm saying is Dele Alli needs to find within himself to go up to the next level. And I think he needs to find it within himself. I think Jose Mourinho is trying to bully it out of him. I don't think that's the right tactics. I was excited when he was linked with the move to Real Madrid because I think that's the kind of impetus he needs to give himself a fresh challenge. I think he's a brilliant player. I just think that Mourinho said yesterday, it's 99% the player, 1% me. And Dele Alli needs to be putting more in to find himself again and go again. And that's what would save English football, would set us up and would win us the World Cup. But Dele Alli, firing on all cylinders, would win us the World Cup.
Yeah, very quickly, Matt, just coming back on that. What Dele needs is a very good manager to get the best out of him because he's an unusual player to get the best out of. Do we actually know? And the reason why I like him a lot is you never actually know what exactly he is as a player. In terms of he doesn't fit the mold of a pressing midfielder. He doesn't fit the mold of a guy who gets on the ball and creates. He doesn't fit the mold of an out-and-out attacking midfielder. He's an unusual player. He's almost a unique player, and that's why he needs a very good manager to get the best out of him. And I don't think Jose will do that.
Well, that's the thing. It's not. Pochettino struggled at times with Dele Alli as well. Not forget, brush that under the carpet. For as much as they were close and Poch tried to nurture him through, there were times when his form dipped. Athletically, it's not like Mesut Ozil when anyone's questioning his condition. He's right at the top of the stats at Spurs. He can run and run and run. And on top of that, he's got this amazing ability to do the unexpected. And that's what could potentially make him a great player. What he's got to do is believe that he's that great player and work in the same way that Harry Kane's worked on his game to get to that final upper echelon, which at the moment he seems a little bit too content to sit just behind. And I you occasionally see him. He's very much, you've met him a few times, I'm sure, possibly met him more than I have, I don't know. But he's very mild-mannered, very quiet, very sensitive almost. And he just doesn't seem to have that drive that gets him to the very peak. And we can all be impressed with the drive that's got him as far as it has, because that is exceptional. But the top footballers are ultra exceptional. They're not just brilliant, they're amazingly brilliant. And that's where I think he needs that extra push. And Mourinho's trying the old-fashioned way to beat him with a stick, nurture him with a carrot, and it's not working. I think Dele's got to find that within himself. And if he doesn't, then, like I say, I don't think he's going to be quite the player that we all hope he can be.
Matt, how dare you question Mesut Ozil's work rate? You're speaking to Andy Dunn, who's obviously secretary of the Mesut Ozil fan club. I do find it really, really a bit strange how we rewrite history a little bit on players. I can't help but sort of being slightly amused by the sort of reports linking with Jose Mourinho this week with the move for Jesse Lingard, because, Mourinho and Man United, Mourinho was so good for Lingard at Man United. Well, I don't remember it quite like that, to be honest. He might have sort of said some nice things when he sort of kind of left, but I don't think there was too many players that sort of, in the attacking midfield sense that sort of benefited. And that's a weird one. But equally, I just think that, we'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't remember that Dele, had issues with Poch and kind of was in and out of the team. Why is that? I think that's injuries as much as anything. I think we are overlooking the fact that basically last 2 years, he came back from that World Cup so quickly. He was such a young player then, so many games, so many kind of muscle strains, hamstrings, and it's held him back. And it's basically for 2 years. I think injuries is as big a factor as any sort of man management or any issue with a manager. I really do, and I'm with Andy on that. In that, basically, I think you can't not be sympathetic to that. It's incredibly frustrating. And Dele, he's at his best when he's in a groove. Injuries haven't allowed him to get into that groove.
But John, on that, Harry Kane, when he comes back, he still scores goals, doesn't he? Dele needs. I think his confidence was shaken by those injuries. Yes. He's now mentally got to find that confidence back again. Believe he was as immortal as he felt he was before he got injured. Harry Kane's got that mentality. Dele Alli doesn't at the moment. That's what I'm saying. That's the difference.
Yeah, John, I'm going to stick you in a cab and send you across London to Chelsea, where another player is having a bit of a nightmare. Probably an understatement, but a nightmare start to the season in Kepa, the goalkeeper. We all saw his horrific blunder last weekend in the 2-0 defeat to Liverpool. When you look at a player like that and you see that he cost £71 million and we're less than 2 weeks into the season, Frank Lampard has decided enough's enough, I'm going to bring in someone else, and he's just signed Mendy from, I can't remember where he signed.
Rennes.
Yeah, Rennes, yeah. 22 million. That's pretty damning of Kepa. And is it also not damning of the scouting system at Chelsea, who authorised who sanctioned the purchase of Kepa when he's clearly not worth £71 million and clearly not up to the demands of the Premier League?
No, listen, it is a really interesting one with Kepa, because when I first looked at Kepa, let's be honest here, guys. When Kepa first came across the radar, he was linked with major clubs beforehand, by the way. I think the sort of Real Madrid were linked with him, Barcelona, and so he could have moved within Spain. And he was incredibly well thought of in Spain. I mean, he's been in the Spain squad, and I'm pretty sure he's got captain's knee. So immediately when I saw him, though, physically, I'm thinking, well, that's David De Gea. He's on the smaller side, I would say, both in terms of height and physique. He's really not as small as basically when you look at him on the pitch, that he gives you the impression that he is. I thought that basically, rather like with David De Gea, I remember David De Gea, having some early physical tests, but particularly there was one game at West Ham which springs to mind that we're thinking, is this guy really cut out for English football? And I was thinking that the same would be the same for Kepa, basically, in that first season. And I think, I spoke to someone who works in Spanish football last weekend, and they were just amazed, frankly, how it's just not worked out for him, because he is a talent. I think the biggest turning point of all was the Carabao Cup final, when basically he refused to be substituted, didn't want it, didn't agree with it, didn't want to come off. I think that was an unbelievable moment. That kind of shook him, shook his confidence, shook his belief, and from there he's descended and got gradually worse and worse and worse. And now you look at Kepa and you're thinking he's going to drop a clanger in every single game. The only issue is whether he gets away with not conceding a goal from that, standard wicket in every game. And then basically he's let one in at Brighton, he's let one in against Liverpool, and it's just getting costlier and costlier and costlier. And frankly, I'm amazed that, I mean, listen, the issue is obvious that basically they're never going to get someone to take Kepa off their hands. And that basically, should they have made it work, maybe they should have just cut their losses. But that's easier said than done at this market. And I think that basically signing Mendy is just a sticking plaster. He's £22 million for a reason. And basically, he was a solid, decent keeper by all accounts in France without being absolutely outstanding. And I think it's just pushing the problem down the road. I don't know. I think the signing of Mendy is not necessarily to say to Mendy, you're going to be our new number one. It's designed to get Kepa back and up to speed, to push him, to challenge him. I'm not sure, looking at him, that's going to work.
John, you mentioned his height there. I mean, how tall are you? You're not the tallest bloke I've ever met, but you've been a world-class goalkeeper down the years. Matt, what does Lampard have to take some responsibility for this? Because clearly he will have known in the back of his mind that Kepa, maybe his confidence is shot and he wasn't probably in the right frame of mind to keep getting picked. Should he have picked Caballero from the start of the season?
Do you know what? No, I don't think so. I don't think you can blame Frank Lampard on this, with much as people seem to want to be rewriting his success as a manager. Just to back up what John just said, and that's not normally my habit, but Edward Mendy 6'6", and that I think says in one measurement everything you need, backs up that argument that Frank Lampard wants a presence in that goal, and a 39-year-old Argentinian isn't that either. So to go with Caballero, I was at the game last night. He did okay. He had a lot more to do than he should have done against the Barnsley side that lost 6-0. And let's just put it on record that was a very flattering scoreline for Chelsea. But no, you can't start a season with a 39-year-old goalkeeper who you've got doubts about anyway. You've got to hope that it comes right. You've got to give your main £71 million man a chance to show what he can do. But equally, Frank Lampard knows what it takes to play for a top club. And he knows that if Kepa's not doing it, he needs to be called out for that. There's no point pretending. And that's why I think there's been the criticism from him and the admission of mistakes, and why he's looking to rectify the problem now. Kepa could come good. There was obviously something that somebody saw that made him worth that amount of money. And that's not a risk when you pay that sort of money. You're paying for an absolute guarantee for that amount of money. So somebody saw something that should have worked. And if they can replace it and patch over it, as John says, for 22 million, then that's great in the short term. And to be fair, if you're going to find someone to pick a goalkeeper, Petr Cech probably should know what he's talking about. So if he sees something in him, then the chances are he might be okay.
Andy, when Guardiola took over at Man City, he decided that Joe Hart was surplus to requirements, which was a major story at the time. He knew he needed a much better goalkeeper if City were going to win the title, defend the title. Liverpool did the same, signed Alisson. Is this Lampard's admission that they need another significant change between the posts if they're going to challenge the title this season, or are we overplaying it? And is this guy Mendy not the answer? I mean, he was out of work 5 years ago, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, listen, it would be remiss of me to sort of say how good or indifferent Mendy is. I just have not seen enough of him to know that, just as I hadn't seen enough of Kepa probably before he came to Chelsea. What I would say is that Chelsea clearly believed that Kepa was Manchester City's Ederson and was Liverpool's Alisson. That's clearly what they thought at the time. And clearly this guy training every day, so they must know what he can and can't do. It's clearly in a match situation that he has issues, which obviously is the be-all and end-all. Having said that, and without, his litany of mistakes are there for everyone to see. What I would say is that, Kepa, unlike Alisson, hasn't got Virgil van Dijk in front of him, hasn't got a brilliant defensive unit in front of him. Let's listen, the 50-odd goals that Chelsea conceded in the Premier League, the 70-odd they conceded all last season, were all knocked down to Kepa. That tells you that those figures of Chelsea's defence last season tells you a defence that isn't giving the keeper, a massive amount of protection. If you're exposed, then you're more liable to make more mistakes. As I say, this isn't defending the glaring errors. It clearly is not working. They clearly need a change. For his good, for Kepa's career, he needs to go somewhere else, regain his confidence. Chelsea need a keeper who is not going to be prone to these amounts of mistakes. Well, I was surprised that they haven't done anything before now. Actually before the season starts, go out there and get a keeper. Listen, test the water. Maybe test the water at United. Who've got more keepers than they can shake a stick at. World class keepers. They've probably got 3. So go there and see what can happen here. That might actually come up. Dean Henderson does not get ahead of De Gea before maybe over the next couple of weeks. He's going to want to go.
John, let's head to Manchester United, because I've been reading reports in various papers saying Manchester United are now already facing a mini crisis. They've played just one league game this season. I know this is often the case at United. They're such a massive club. They're only just 1 or 2 defeats away from, major problems. But you have to say, while that might be over-egging the pudding a little bit, you have to say, I know Dunny was at the game last weekend and I was there. They were so poor against Crystal Palace. It made you wonder. They had no direction, no strategy. They got well beaten by a very mediocre Palace team. Taking nothing away from Palace, they took the chance as well, and they deserved to win. It wasn't the story of the day. Wasn't about how well Palace played. It was basically how poor United were. And on top of that, they've got this issue where they've been trying to get Jadon Sancho in. They can't manage to get a deal over the line. Prior to the game, in the build-up to the game, Solskjaer made an astonishing sort of attack on the FA over the Mason Greenwood scandal. Basically went to war with the FA, blaming them for their handling of him. It all just feels like it's a bit uneasy and not unravelling, but, you just look at the club and you just think there's several things just not right at the minute.
Yeah, it does feel like that. And listen, the biggest thing of all that really struck me was that they looked undercooked against Crystal Palace. They basically looked a long way from being sharp, being intense, being ready to kind of play their game, which had really taken them on such an, impressive finish to last season, frankly. And listen, we could talk about the kind of disrupted pre-season. You could certainly, aim that and sort of kind of as a point of defence until you then go and see Man City play so well and be at it from their day one at Wolves. Because no matter what happened in that second half when they're under the cosh a bit, to go to Wolves and win 3-1 is an incredibly impressive start to the season. And some of their players, particularly De Bruyne, Sterling, even Stones, right at it from kind of day one. And I just thought Rodri was excellent too. And those are players that are ready. And frankly, United looked undercooked. They looked as if they'd been off the back of a summer where Harry Maguire has had his problems. Mason Greenwood, was caught in the eye of the storm. I found that Solskjaer blast at Southgate and the FA just laughable. I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous. Fair play to the FA and to England and Southgate for encouraging young players to face the media, which was one of his points. He shouldn't have put in sort of the firing line to do those interviews. They feel that, and I agree with them, that empowers young players. Who's to blame for what happened, in Iceland, basically being sent home in disgrace? There's no one to blame bar Mason Greenwood on that one. Him and Phil Foden have to take that responsibility. And if they're trying to, shy away from that responsibility, then shame on Solskjaer, frankly, because if you make excuses for players like that, they'll only get worse. And that I thought that was poor management. The notion that Solskjaer, manager of Man United, didn't have Southgate's phone number. Blimey, it's embarrassing. It was ridiculous, that. And so I felt that United looked at a team that thinking, we're not ready for the season. There's been all this talk about kind of bringing players in. We haven't quite done our business yet. We're not. Is this the season's kicking off today? Is it? I'm not sure it is. They look a team absolutely all over the place with so many question marks. And, if they have to start then unfortunately, with a major handicap starting, but behind the pace, having to play catch up as they did last season, then they'll do well to be in this title race, and they'll do well again to kind of finish top four, and they have to overcome those obstacles very quickly. And it's a test of Solskjaer, because people seem, former teammates in the media who are very, very good pundits, seem to be shifting that blame on Man United, whereas in the previous regime, it was all about Jose. It was drive-by shootings against Jose. Make no mistake about that. But at the moment, they seem to be sort of, aiming towards Man United with Solskjaer. And Solskjaer, to a degree, I think is getting a bit of an easy ride.
Matt, is it unfair to judge United on just one game? And on the evidence of that one game, do you think they can challenge for the top four this season? And who do they need to sign before the window closes to make sure that they do have a genuine chance of being in the top 3 or 4?
No, of course it's not unfair. Otherwise, what would we be doing? We've got to have a go at Man United after one game. It's a bit limited thinking. What I would say, just to recap, Mason Greenwood, the whole stuff with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, you put that in Fergie's voice, and it's a classic diversionary tactic to set up some headlines that aren't about Manchester United. And he knows that things aren't quite right there. Victor Lindelof seemed to be out of his way to prove that things weren't quite right there in that first game. I was looking at it. Defensively, they're all over the shop, and that's what they need to sort out if they're going to sign somebody. Jadon Sancho, I still said when we're doing our previews, that's a signing they need to make to show that they're proper players at a time when everyone else is signing all these players. Whether it's morally right or not, who knows? But if we're just talking about football, that's the signing they've still got to make. But they've got 7 centre-backs. To be fair to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he's only signed one of them, and that's Harry Maguire, who's probably the best of the lot. He needs to sign another one to replace the centre-backs signed by Van Gaal, signed by Jose Mourinho, and even signed by, dare we say it, Sir Alex Ferguson, that aren't good enough for Manchester United. And if he can find another centre-back rock to go alongside Maguire and play properly as a defensive pairing, then they've still got a chance to finish top 4 and slowly begin to build a title challenge, which is what they need to do over the next 2 or 3 years.
Andy, John touched on it earlier when he said it. That Solskjaer in that bizarre Zoom press conference he had last week admitted or claimed he didn't have Gareth Southgate's number. Don't you think that's weird that the manager of Manchester United would not have the phone number of the England manager, given the fact that United year on year produce a production line of England internationals, and Gareth Southgate is a regular visitor, or was prior to lockdown, a regular visitor to Old Trafford? And I remember Fergie, was a famous incident between Eriksson and Fergie, where Eriksson went into Fergie's office before the 2006 World Cup in Germany. And Fergie basically said, "You're not taking Wayne Rooney to Germany." And Eriksson basically told him to go do it. Fergie threatened to kill him if he took Rooney to Germany, and they had a massive row, and Eriksson stormed out of the office. I mean, Solskjaer needs to be building some sort of relationship with Southgate, surely?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, listen, maybe it was a bit flippant that he didn't have his number. It doesn't really bother me either way whether he's got his number or not, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, listen, Southgate, you can flip it round and say that if Southgate is going to give Mason Greenwood his debut and pick him for the squad, then maybe he should. You would have thought Southgate would have had some conversation with Solskjaer, initiated the conversation himself, and said, "Listen, I'm calling up this kid. Do you think it's a good idea? What are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? Is there anything I need to look out for when I've got him here?" Maybe he should be speaking to the club boss himself. Maybe he should be initiating that. Yes, obviously, it's odd he hasn't got his number. You would have thought that every Premier League manager would have Southgate's number and the Southgate's number, and the Southgate's every manager's number, and they would speak. But they clearly haven't spoken. So I wouldn't particularly lay that blame down at Solskjaer's door, or indeed at Southgate's. I'm just saying that, it's just an odd thing. It's a distraction, as Matt said. It's a distraction from the real issues at United, which, again, John has highlighted. And obviously, me and you were there, Jeremy, is how undercooked they look and how basically they looked unfit in comparison with the fitness levels that we've seen from the big two, Liverpool and Manchester City, who look right up to speed straight away. They just didn't look up to speed. And, of course, he picked an odd team as well, picking Daniel James, Fosu-Mensah, and even McTominay ahead of Wan-Bissaka, Greenwood and Van der Beek was a strange decision in the first place that backfired. But, I mean, I wouldn't get too perplexed about Solskjaer and Southgate not speaking now.
Matt, maybe you could send me Southgate's mobile number and I'll pass it on to Solskjaer next time.
Strictest confidence, mate. Strictest confidence.
John, can we just touch on Liverpool? They've obviously made a great start to the season. They brushed aside Chelsea, albeit 10-man Chelsea. They announced the signing of Jota from Wolves prior to that game at Chelsea. I've been very impressed with the way Liverpool have done their transfer business this summer. They don't sort of crow about who they're trying to sign. They actually just get on and sign the player and then announce it. There doesn't seem to be a big build-up in the press. Do you share those views?
Yeah, I do really. I mean, listen, they've spent the whole summer, haven't they, been linked with Thiago?
Yeah.
And so, frankly, they've somehow managed to kind of...
Was that a smoke?
Sorry?
Could that have been a smokescreen? Yeah,
because I just feel that basically they've actually played that really well. So that's another sort of credit to them, because they basically, they've masked it by sort of saying, oh, no, we're not going to get him. We need to get one out first. It's just not going to happen until we get one out. And then sure enough, with 2 weeks left of the window, they do it, like a thief in the night and nick him for 20, 25 million pounds. You are signing an unbelievable player for that price. He's got a year left and he's just sensational. And I just think what an unbelievable piece of business that is. I love watching him. I go to games when he's playing, and I've done with Bayern Munich, and you could almost just sit and watch him just run a game. Forget the rest of it. That's a bit of a sideshow, because Thiago's sitting there and he's always in space, always available, and he just picks his passes. He reminds me of, I'm sure a few of us have played Sunday League, and sort of kind of if you suddenly got the ringer in your Sunday League team, and basically he stands out an absolute mile, doesn't he? He's so much better than everyone else, whether it's that semi-pro lad or that lad who used to be on the books of or had trials with whatever. We all know what we're talking about here. He stands out like a sore thumb. Well, Thiago can do that in the Premier League. I mean, he's just amazing. He's just sensational. And I think with Jota is also an interesting signing, because, been linked with Ismaila Sarr from Watford. I think there was a degree of interest there, but a couple of their players obviously sometimes have African Nations Cup call-ups. Well, Sarr would have been the same, and Sarr is particularly potentially a backup for one of the front three. Well, Jota is a bit more versatile. Jota is a bit more sort of also on the front foot, and as Linda's sort of the Klopp's number 2 called him, he's a pressing monster. I mean, he's so hard working as a footballer. It's a bit of left field as a signing. No one particularly saw it coming. And again, I think it's a bit of a masterstroke. And here we go again. Liverpool perhaps kick on and make 2 very intelligent signings.
Can I just ask you, who will be sacrificed for those 2? Because clearly they will play more than not.
Well, I think Jota, frankly, it wouldn't surprise me if basically somewhere down the line you're seeing Jota as potentially slotting in and covering for one of the sort of kind of front 3. In a modern squad, he'll get a lot of minutes. And then basically, I still think he's versatile enough to play perhaps in midfield, a front-running midfielder. And then, obviously in Wolf setup, he's played wide a bit as well. So I think he's a versatile player and gives them options. So I don't know that and that's the beauty of Liverpool at the moment. I think he complements the squad rather than an immediate sacrifice. Whereas I think with Thiago, will now give that midfield 3 a different dimension. That's the wonderful thing about him.
If I could just say, I almost agree with everything that Crossy's saying there. And what I would say about Thiago, what's interesting is that since he was signed by Jurgen Klopp, the man who can do no wrong, he's become the best player in the world. Almost overnight. I mean, I looked through the Ballon d'Or long lists for the last decade, and I can't find Thiago on there. And I can't believe this. How come this guy who's now immediately the best player in the Premier League
Get with the hipsters, Donny. Get with the hipsters.
I'm looking at him thinking, well, is it because he's been signed by Jurgen Klopp and Klopp is the man who can do no wrong? To a certain extent, yes. And they say it's the bargain deal of the century. Well, a guy had a year left of his contract. He's 29. He's got a 4-year deal. It's still a significant outlay. I think he's a fantastic sign. I think he'll be great. And as John says, he's a lovely player to watch. And we've all watched him and really enjoyed his football. For him to suddenly become overnight, the on the planet, which seems to be the implication from a lot of people who are watching it. I'm not quite sure. Let's see how he does. Let's see, rather than one half against Chelsea, how it pans out over the season. But is he a good signing? Yes. Is Jota a good signing? Yes, they made good signings. I think Liverpool, if they made one more signing, maybe a defensive signing to give more competition in that defensive unit, unstoppable.
Andy, can I just say, you were the only one of the Crossy and I were there on Sunday, and watching Thiago pick out the runs of people he'd never met before. It was just like magic. I mean, I was fairly neutral on the signing. I was interested to see how it would work, but it was one of the few times I felt privileged at being able to be actually in lockdown. Watching him
against 10 men.
Against 10 men, but he was still offering passes.
He was passing to people. I mean, and what does it matter whether he's ever met them before or not? I mean, bloke in red shirt, same as another bloke in a red shirt. He's a footballer, a very high-class footballer who's played at the highest level, and he's fantastic. But, I'm sure it was a privilege, yeah.
In red shirts, I'll give you that. But there were different red shirts, different players who make different runs, and he just fitted in just like a glove. It was impressive to watch. Against 10 men, all those things, and I'm excited to see what he does against a properly organised defence with the same number of players on the pitch. But I'm quite excited to see that. And I was surprised at how much of a difference he made in that second half.
Andy, let's just nip across to Goodison Park and talk about who is genuinely the best player in the world right now, and the man I said would be the worst signing of James Rodriguez. Obviously Everton made a great start to the season. Calvert-Lewin got a hat-trick last week. They're joint top of the league. What's changed, do you think? And do you think the expectation levels are now in danger of going through the roof at Goodison Park with the supporters?
Yeah, I mean, when I say in danger, as Carlo Ancelotti himself has said, there is absolutely nothing wrong with those expectations going through the roof. That's where they should be at Goodison Park, with an owner who's ambitious and who is well resourced, with a manager who is world class. Why shouldn't the expectations be through the roof? Especially when you've made the 3 signings that he's made it in Decore Allen and James. And strange enough, just quickly, if you look at, I'm not a great one for stats and their relevance, but however, if you look at the stats of James over the last 7-8 seasons and Thiago's, they are pretty similar. And James has been seen as a universal flop and a signing that might not work, and Thiago's been seen as signing a combination of Messi, Ronaldo, and whoever. And it's weird. We said on this that the James could turn out. Listen, I have no doubt that Allen was going to be a great signing. No doubt that Decore was going to be a good signing. James, obviously, it was, well, how's he going to adapt? He's been struggling a little bit elsewhere. How's he going to adapt to Everton and to the Premier League? Well, so far on the limited evidence, he's adapted very, very well. I would say that in the opening game against Spurs, he got a lot more space than he probably thought he would get in the Premier League. And probably the same was true last Saturday. However, it's amazing how 3 signings, you talk about making the right signings, 3 signings have just changed the whole mindset of the team, has changed the mindset of the fans, has basically given them a whole new midfield that is forward thinking, that is always thinking forward. Whereas last season it was a midfield that was entirely bereft of confidence and was negative and would look to shift responsibility, to play the easy ball and to let someone else do the imaginative, creative, dangerous work. That's not the case now. They're full of confidence, and the whole place has been given a huge lift, despite, of course, Jordan Pickford getting to Jordan Pickford things yesterday.
I'll ask you all three of you now. Start with you, Dunny. Where do you think Everton realistically can finish?
Which Dunny?
You.
Realistically, listen, I think they can. I genuinely think that they can have a puncher's chance of finishing top four, and I would certainly expect them to finish inside the top eight, probably the top six.
Dunny too.
Dunny too. When I hit the juggernaut of my relegation candidates, Crystal Palace, on the weekend, and that'll be the final out of them. Whoops. No, I think top four might be beyond them because of the distance they've got to come. But I was really impressed with them when they beat Spurs, and I think if they're not in the top six, they've got reason to be disappointed rather than the hopeless expectation to be disappointed. They're a very good team.
I fancy him finishing sixth. How about that? I'll even go for a number, simply because I just think that, last season we were talking about kind of, Sheffield United pushing for that. I mean, where are Tottenham at the moment? There's going to be, I think, a different cluster of clubs pushing for that top six. And, it would be easy to say, oh, blimey, should they be aiming a little bit higher just because of the amazing start that they've made? If they finish sixth, this season, that will be a huge progression. That will be outstanding progression. And, that is also, therefore, by the way, sort of kind of gateway to more in the following season. So I think if they finish sixth, that'll be a very good season for Everton and perhaps, a pathway to more.
Matt, in the 8 games of the weekend last week in the Premier League, there were 39 goals in 8 games. Is that, obviously we all love to see goals flying in left, right and centre. That's what makes the Premier League so exciting. Is that more damning of the standard of defending, or does it just highlight how great the attacking players are throughout the Premier League now?
I think it highlights how easy it is to win penalties with VAR and handball. I think there's those sorts of considerations to be held in mind. But yeah, I think it was an exceptional weekend. It's one of those, you have weekends throughout history where loads of goals went in. There are some incredible attacking talents in the Premier League at the moment, but at the same time, people earn their money from finding out ways of stopping goals go in. And I think we'll have weekends in the future where barely a goal's gone in and we'll be saying, how's this supposed to be the best league in the world? I just think it was an anomaly, but all for it. Let's have more of it.
John, would you rather see a 4-3 game or with bad defending or great defending and a 2-1 win?
4-3 all day long. I just think, I do think...
Get yourself up to Ellen Road then, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. I just feel that, a couple of seasons ago, we were really questioning the standard of defending. And I do think that basically, defending has dropped away, I feel, in recent years. So, let's get that right. But I just think also that teams are being a bit more expansive, for whatever reason. Whether that's the kind of the excitement, giddy new heights of a new season, I don't know. But basically, I think that clubs are, exploring different formations. I think that a couple of seasons ago, 4-2-3-1, for example, was all the rage, and that's been tweaked a bit. And then basically, you could often end up with kind of 2 holding midfield players, and sometimes it would feel like a back 6. And I just think that teams have moved towards 4-3-3, 3 at the back. It's just lent itself to more. This isn't. I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think it's a happy. Suddenly, we've had 2 weekends where we've just seen the glut of goals. I do think there's a proper trend and a proper reason behind it. And I think that's great. I think that's brilliant.
Do you think, as the season pans out, it'll be interesting to see how it stacks up stats-wise. Do we think it's anything to do with the absence of a crowd? Just looking at it with a sort of a broad view, are away teams more adventurous without the home crowd? Without the intimidation or of the home crowd and the pressure from the home crowd, are away teams, simply treating it as a game they will play on the training ground against, anyone else. It seems to me that I'm just seeing away teams now scoring a lot of goals, being ultra ambitious, very attacking, and it's brilliant to watch. It's great football to watch. I just wonder if when we collate all the stats at the end of a full season, which unfortunately might well be a full season without fans, if that has anything to do with it.
Brilliant stuff, guys. That's great. Listen, let's wrap it up there. Just before I let you go, it would be remiss of me not to mention this remarkable story that Ryan Reynolds, the Hollywood A-list,
yes,
to Wrexham. It's an amazing story. Came out last night. Him and another guy want to invest in Wrexham, £2 million apparently, which is a hell of a lot of money for a club like that. If you could have a superhero, Ryan Reynolds plays the guy in Deadpool. If you could have a superhero come join your club and invest some money, who would you like? John?
Thanks for that, Jeremy.
Would Superman be good enough to help Arsenal win the title this season?
No, I'll tell you what I'd do. I would go for Superman. Simple as that. But basically, being completely neutral here, I would put Superman in, and I'd tell you what, I'd just put him in goal for Chelsea. And I'd get poor old Kepa, and I'd order him to the nearest phone box. You remember those phone box kids? That's one for the younger listeners. And basically do a quick twirl in the phone box, and emerge. Kepa went in, Clark Kent went in, and suddenly emerges Superman out the other side, and he could save all shots at him, basically. So I do think he would be my modern day superhero. What an amazing story from Wrexham! Brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. Surely Spider-Man would have to be in goal, wouldn't he? I mean, he'd be unstoppable, wouldn't he? In net, Spider-Man. But that Ryan Reynolds story, it's great. It's a great story. I actually did my, would you believe, my journalism, my NCCJ journalism course day release at Wrexham College, which is right next to the ground, the racecourse ground. And there's a pub that actually overlooks the ground called the Turf Tavern. And I'll tell you what, I mean, the thought of Ryan Reynolds in there, mate, it's just fantastic. It really is. And wait till, if he gets Wrexham to the big time, you'll know what acting's all about if he goes to watch that.
Donny, any advance on Superman in goal?
I can't go on Superman in goal. What I would say about the Wrexham story, though, is that when it comes to them passing the fit and proper persons test, according to my wife, he's got no problems with the first part. Because he's
Great stuff, boys. Right, thanks for joining us. Thanks to Andy Dunn from the Daily Mirror, John Cross from the Daily Mirror, Matt Dunn from the Daily Express. Hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you all next week. Thank you.